and CEO of the Weingart Foundation.
Yay!
Hi.
Woohoo! Okay, here, we'll come to here. All right. Good afternoon and welcome. We hope you had a good morning. It was a full morning. Thank you all for participating with us here today. And we're very excited to be joined by Joanna Jackson, the CEO and president of the Weingart Foundation. Joanna, who will help introduce our final panel of the day.
Yes. Thank you, Mary. Good afternoon, everyone. As Mary said, I'm Joanna Jackson, president and CEO of the Weingart Foundation, and we're really honored to introduce an important panel on housing and affordability in California. Two issues that will be core to the new governor's agenda and mission to build a California that truly serves all. As we all know, Los Angeles here, we are grappling with an unprecedented homelessness crisis, coupled with some of the highest housing costs in the country. And as we know, communities of color are disproportionately impacted. At the Weingart Foundation, we are proud to partner with organizations, with advocates throughout the region to build a Southern California where everyone has the opportunity to have a safe and affordable home and to flourish in an economy that actually serves everyone. We work to partner with organizations that are supporting tenants, people experiencing homelessness, to create affordable housing, community-based affordable housing, supporting housing with the services that people actually need and deserve. And we also move a bold systems change agenda to get at the core of our housing and homelessness crisis, and also to work to dismantle the systemic racism and the anti-Black racism that actually sit at the core. So, yes. As the state continues to grapple with these and other crises, this nonpartisan forum today gives you the opportunity to hear from leading candidates for governor regarding their priorities and perspectives on critical issues that are shaping and facing our communities, including the cost of housing and affordability, and the effect on the state's economic competitiveness and how they are going to help to create a California where all of our residents can actually thrive.
Yeah, thank you, Joanna. It's really important, the work you do. And I'm happy to say that yesterday, many of you may have seen a housing survey that we just released with FM3, John Fairbanks' group. This housing survey is the fourth in a series that we have done since 2019. And what it does is it really takes a look at what Angelenos are saying. Over 750 Angelenos are saying about how they feel about our housing challenges and also what the solutions are. And we really focus on the solutions. But this time we did something a little bit different. On your program today, you'll see a QR code. If you go to that QR code, you will find our survey. You will find the questions we asked. You will find the analysis that FM3 did of the poll. And what it'll tell you is a bunch of things that are super important. It'll tell you that voters still have a very deep concern about housing costs, and homelessness concerns have intensified. And there is a very broad-based consensus around all housing types now. The way it used to be one kind of housing type, permanent supportive housing, now it's about all forms of housing, as the mayor was talking about earlier, the importance of interim housing. The other thing we're seeing that's different is mixed income housing, serving middle-class families. There's now a heightened awareness is that they are increasingly priced out of Los Angeles. So this survey also does something super interesting. We decided to test the key ideas of our candidates. And I have to say, the key ideas of housing solutions from this group of candidates is extremely positive. There's some very important subtleties within it that I think our moderator, Alex Cohen, will get at today. But I would strongly suggest you take a look at that. And any portion of the summit that you did not see today or want to watch, if you just go to our website at www.labusinesscouncil.org, you can pick up today's summit. And also tonight on LAS at 7 p.m., this will air, the candidate forum or the candidate panel will air in its entirety. So it is now my supreme pleasure to introduce our moderator today, Emmy award-winning journalist, Alex Cohen. Alex. And the candidates. Superb. Thank you.
Of course.
All right.
Thanks.
And I'm not alone. Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me here today to moderate this incredibly important gubernatorial candidate panel focused squarely on one of the most important issues facing Californians today, housing. As the LABC Institute's brand new survey clearly demonstrates, now more than ever, Angelenos are deeply concerned about housing supply and affordability. Here today to talk about California's role in delivering housing at scale, with speed, and at the cost that Californians need are four of the candidates running to be our next governor. We're very honored to have with us, to my left, the Republican candidate and small business owner, Steve Hilton, and our three Democratic candidates who are with us here today, San Jose Mayor Matt Mahan, climate advocate Tom Steyer, and former Los Angeles Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa. Round of applause. And now we're going to do a little bit of housekeeping. First and foremost, that applause was lovely. Please do not do it again or make any other noise until the end so we have time to hear from our candidates. That's point number one. Point number two, the candidates on stage met objective qualifying criteria and have reached a polling threshold of 3% or higher. That's based on an average of 3 reputable, nonpartisan, and independent surveys taken between December of last year and today. All gubernatorial candidates who met these standards were invited. The 4 who accepted our invitation are here today. For most of our questions, these panelists will have 90 seconds to respond. I will specify if there is a shorter time to respond. Gentlemen, I may interject if I believe that you are not directly answering the questions we have asked. We do have in front of us here a visible timer, and we will note at this juncture we have the ability to mute your microphones if you go over. Don't make us do it. To ensure fairness, we will be rotating the order in which questions are answered so that each of our candidates will be able to provide the first answer at least once. There will be no opening nor closing statements today. This is not a debate, nor is it a forum to attack each other. We really see this as an opportunity to showcase your individual platform and vision. We ask you not to invoke the names of other candidates in a disparaging manner at any time. Please be civil. There will be no crosstalk or rebuttal on this day. We asked for no visible responses here. Also, please notice that this is going to be recorded for later broadcasts locally on LAist, statewide by KQED. So please be careful if you are entering or exiting the room. We ask you to refrain from doing that if you can. Okay, let's get to the fun stuff. Our first question, for which we will have 60 seconds on our timer, beginning with Steve Hilton. When you hear the word home, what comes to mind for you personally and why?
Thank you, Alex. 2 things. First of all, literally helping to build them. My parents are Hungarian. They were refugees from communism, grew up in England. My stepfather was also Hungarian, and he was in a refugee camp and then ended up in England and worked in construction. And he ran, by the time I was there, a small local general contracting business, and I would go and help him build houses, literally, when I was a kid. The second thing, after I moved to London, after Oxford University, started a business, made a bit of money. We didn't have money in our family, but I made enough to buy a place in London in my 20s. And I still remember that feeling, walking across the threshold of this place that I earned. And it's a crime to me that we're taking away that sense of achievement and opportunity from this generation in California, and we have to get that back.
Thank you. Matt Mahan, 60 seconds. What does home mean to you?
Thanks, Alex, and good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be back. I sat on this stage as a new mayor a little over 3 years ago, and we talked about the plan for addressing housing affordability. I'm excited to give you an update on that today. But to answer your question, Alex, when I think about the word home, my mind immediately goes to growing up and the fact that my family was so lucky to be able to own our home. We were paycheck to paycheck growing up. My mom was a teacher. My dad was a mailman. But I remember their conversations about how to make the mortgage payment. That was a constant backdrop in my home as a kid. And we were very lucky. I also think about the thousands of people in my city and across the state who don't have that stability. And I'm proud that in San Jose, we were willing to approach the problem differently. We've led the state in building an entire continuum of interim housing and shelter and moved thousands of people off our streets in the last 3 years. We're finally turning the corner on this huge moral failing in our society.
Thank you. Tom Steyer.
So when I think about home, I obviously think about family. And I remember growing up with my family, and the things I remember most are lying in bed, reading with my mom and my two brothers, often, believe it or not, the Bible. And I remember the same thing with my kids. The most fun I've ever had in my life is sitting around the dining table with my wife and 4 kids and just shooting the breeze every night. And it's that is so worth it. So, and I will tell you, when I first bought a house in San Francisco, I thought it was too expensive, and I called my mom to say, the prices in California houses are amazing. And she said, Tom, it's not an investment in an asset. It's not about money. It's about building a life and building a family. It's not about the money. And that is exactly the point about why home ownership is a critical part of the California dream. The ability to build a life and a family in a place with peace and safety, so you can read together in bed and, basically love each other.
Antonio Villaraigosa.
First of all, it's great to be here at my alma mater, and I want to acknowledge and thank the LABC. And every summit that you had, every year I attended and keynoted, and proud to have worked with them throughout the years. I want to acknowledge Olivia Swiller, who got me to change my schedule to be here. I wouldn't have done it if I hadn't known her since she was a little girl. And I want to thank all of you. Let me just say what I think about. Like you, I think about family. We didn't own a home, but I remember my mother struggling to make ends meet and dreaming to own a home. I remember the guilt I felt when I bought a home at 25, that my mother had worked her whole life and she wasn't able to buy a home until later. And I remember the elation I had that, here I am buying a home for $42,000 in the hills of Cal State LA. So that's what I remember, and that's why I'm committed to making sure more people can buy a home.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. From here on out, we'll have 90 seconds to answer these questions, where I believe we'll start maybe to see some differences after those similar themes we just heard. This time beginning with Mayor Matt Mahan, the question is this. Governors often campaign on ambitious housing goals, but implementation requires navigating state agencies, cooperation from local governments and the legislature, and private sector partnerships. What specific experience do each of you bring that demonstrates your ability to execute large-scale housing policy, and how would you translate campaign commitments into realistic outcomes? Mayor Mahan, 90 seconds.
Thanks, Alex. So I'd love to share with you all just a little bit of my record as the mayor of the 3rd largest city in California, San Jose, 1 million residents, where we stopped just making excuses, admiring the problems, studying things, saying, gee, it would be nice if somebody else would fix it. And we started holding ourselves accountable for facilitating home building, interim housing building at scale. We've led the state in building out an entire system of interim housing and moved thousands of people off of our streets. We've reduced unsheltered homelessness by 1/3 over the last 4 years. I also noticed that we kept approving housing projects, 22,000 units, most of which never got built because they didn't pencil. And so I went to my council and we pushed through a huge reform package, ministerial approval in downtown and all of our growth areas, fee reductions, and we got thousands of new homes under construction. I've put out the most practical and comprehensive housing plan on my website. It's mahanforcalifornia.com. You can download the 15-point plan. It is all rooted in tackling the heart of this issue today, which is increasingly not about zoning, it's about the cost of construction, speeding up permitting, reducing fees, simplifying the building code, reforming CEQA and reducing litigation risk. We've got to bring down costs so that more of these projects pencil. That's what we're doing in San Jose, and that's what I'll do as governor.
Thank you. Mr. Steyer.
So the thing that everybody thinks is going on and the problem in California is about permits and that we need to get the permitting process better at the state level. And last year there was a big CEQA reform. I supported it. We pushed really hard for it and it went through. There was a big zoning reform. I pushed for it really hard and it went through. And let me say this, the state government, the legislature is absolutely desperate for housing. And I think that any governor with a vision for housing is going to get a lot of support going forward if we can really make it happen. So that means it really comes down to the other two sectors, which is the local governments and the private sector. The local governments have a lot of control about permitting, they have a lot of control about fees, and they're a big reason it's slow because they view housing as an unfunded mandate. That every time they build a house, they're responsible for education and health, and they don't have the money to do it, so they drag their feet and they put in big fees. I'm gonna pass split roll, corporate real estate tax loophole, $22 billion a year to California, to local places so they can actually permit it. It's really critical to cooperate with those people and to get them to cooperate with us so we shorten permit time and lower fees. But also we need to work with the developers because there are ways to build housing now, industrial construction off-site, putting it together on-site that can drop the per square foot cost by 1/3 to 1/2. Those two things are going to be the two things that really drive whether we build 1 million houses at the price people can afford, and I can do both those things.
Mr. Villaraigosa.
Antonio's fine. You start with record. I was mayor for 8 years in this town. There were 20,000 people downtown. By the time I left, there were 60,000 people. I built more market rate workforce and affordable housing and homeless housing than the 12 years before me. But 4 of my years was the middle of a recession. What do? We got together with a land trust organization that helped us buy land. We worked with all of these enterprises and all these groups who helped us finance some of what we did. The next governor's going to have to do 3 things. First of all, we need to build more, and not just affordable housing, market rate workforce, affordable homeless housing. Second, we need to build faster. And I agree with my colleagues that CEQA was broken. I've been saying that for years. We need one permit shopping. You go in LA, you go to 12 agencies. In the state, you go to multiple agencies, and they all tell you different things. We need first-time buyer assistance. Meet where the market doesn't provide that first-time buyer assistance. We can. There's a $25 billion initiative that no cost to the taxpayer that'll help us do that. And we got to do everything possible to put a housing accountability production board that makes sure we do everything that we say we're going to do.
Thank you. Mr. Hilton.
A lot of good ideas from my colleagues here. I'll get to the specific question, which was, what specific experience do you have that could help us in this situation? I'll point to 3 things. My first job actually was project manager for a construction company many years ago. And you may say, well, what's that got to do with anything at this elevated level? Actually, a lot, because in that role, you have to be incredibly practical and focus on outcomes and results and budgets and timelines. And there's no room for just, skating by on grandiose statements. You've got to really, and that's what I learned. It's my first job. Second piece of relevant experience, many years later, I worked in 10 Downing Street in England as senior advisor to the Prime Minister, David Cameron. And my main responsibility there was the implementation of our domestic policy reform program. And so I saw firsthand how difficult it is to make change happen through a bureaucracy, through a centralized system. The UK government about the same size as the California government. I'm not saying we got everything right, but I learned how hard it is and actually the kind of attitude you need to make things happen. And then the third thing I'd point to is my time, most of my career actually, in business, where you've got to have that problem-solving, pragmatic attitude. Otherwise, nothing happens. I've started businesses here and on the other side of the Atlantic, and you cannot have a bureaucratic, process-oriented mindset. You have to focus on results and getting things done.
Thank you. For this next question, we'll begin with Tom Steyer. The question is this: 96% of respondents in the new LA Business Council survey say it is difficult for Angelenos to afford the cost of housing. 7 out of 10 say it is difficult for them personally. The state has enacted major housing reforms and assigned ambitious regional targets, and yet projects still stall. What do you believe is the single biggest barrier to delivering housing at scale? And what would you change first, if elected, to significantly accelerate production?
So let me say this. I have financed 17,000 low-income housing units. I am a business person. I have been involved in lots of development. And when we look at this problem, what I was trying to say to you, and I know that the question was one, but the two things that we really need to do differently, one is to work with the local counties because they are pushing back very hard. And I said that I was going to close a corporate loophole that would give them $20 billion so they could afford to permit housing. But I think it's more than that, because I think what Antonio said really is critical, that we're going to have much fewer permits and have a coordinated system to get it done faster and get rid of the fees. That is a critical thing. But there are tens of thousands of permitted zone units in the state of California that are not getting built because it's too expensive. And when I talk about using new technologies of industrial construction off-site and then putting it together on-site, that is a critical change in this state. What we're seeing is the cost per square foot in this state is incredibly high, and it is preventing things from getting built. I was talking to developers about it this morning. I was talking about counties about how to work together last night. Those are going to be the two biggest issues, and it's absolutely true. We're going to have to take a non-process oriented, results oriented way of doing it. But this is we have the technology. We're going to have to push this through because people are suffering, and it's important that we take it with the urgency that their suffering mandates.
Thank you. Mr. Villaraigosa. Antonio.
I think the single biggest thing that stopped us is Sacramento is great at setting goals, everybody. They set goals on everything and then don't implement them. The number one job of a governor and a mayor and the president of the United States, a chief executive, is to drill down on the things you promise. You know, I didn't know who McKinsey was before I got started as mayor, but I learned afterwards. I put dashboards by everything. That's how crime went down 48%. That's how graduation rates went up 60%. That's how we built more infrastructure than anybody in the United States during that period. And that's how we reduced greenhouse gases more than anybody. The fact is, that's why I said a housing production accountability board that's drilling down with cities and counties, making sure they're doing what they say they're going to do. A carrot and stick approach, provide when they're doing well and they're doing the right thing, support them, help them, streamline stuff, all of that. When they're not, hold them accountable and draw back that money. That's what we need to do. That's what a chief executive does. You're not doing laws and goals all day long like we do too much in Sacramento. You're actually getting the job done.
Steve Hilton.
I'm afraid, Alex, I'm going to do 3, because there are 3 structural barriers to getting where we want to go that are deeply interconnected. Matt mentioned one of them, which is litigation. We talk about CEQA the whole time, quite rightly, and it's way too complicated. And that's correct. We need to simplify, reduce, and so on. But one of the main problems with CEQA is the private right of action under CEQA. The lawsuits that are filed under CEQA using environmental reasons as a pretext. 70% of CEQA lawsuits are used to block housing. Now let's get to the second structural factor. Most of those lawsuits are filed by unions to use as leverage to negotiate project labor agreements, which then increase the cost of housing because of provisions like skilled and trained workforce, which is a euphemism for union members only, prevailing wage, which is a euphemism for much higher than market rate wages. That's why the bill that Tom mentioned last year, AB 130 and 131, isn't going to make much difference because they have these union carve-outs. That's the second big one, union power. Of course we want people to be well paid. Of course we want workers to have good careers, but not at the cost of making housing so expensive that union workers can't afford to buy them. And then the third one, I'm afraid, is the climate agenda, which of course we all want to protect the environment, but it's gone so far now, so extreme, it's actually getting in the way of other objectives. And if you look at all these barriers to housing, the climate goals are driving up the cost, the regulations on construction, VMT, all these things we need to bring back into balance so we can build the housing we need.
And Mayor Mahan, before we go to you, just a point of clarification for anyone watching online, CEQA, of course, being the California Environmental Quality Act. Mr. Mahan, 90 seconds to you.
Thank you. So you started the question by talking about Angelenos not being able to afford housing. And we should just be very clear with everyone that this is fundamentally a supply problem. In most of our coastal cities, we have seen job growth and population growth outpace housing production. In some places like Silicon Valley, that has been a ratio of nearly 8 new jobs created for every 1 home built over the last couple of decades. That is not sustainable. It prices people out, pushes people to the brink. So the plan that I've put online is rooted in what I have done as mayor of a big city to unblock thousands of homes that are literally under construction as we speak. Capping fees, which is something the state can do. Creating strict timelines for permits. We should have a 30-day deadline for permits for conforming infill projects. And if you don't get the answer from the city, it should simply be by right. We need to simplify building and fire codes where the legislature keeps adding more and more rules and process and requirements every year. We absolutely need to incentivize manufactured or factory-built housing. You can cut the timeline in half and the cost by 20 to 30% quite easily, and then reducing litigation risk. It is all about practical solutions to bringing down the cost of construction so that more of these projects pencil. And once they're financeable, we will see them get built because we've done a lot of the underlying regulatory changes around zoning and other foundational pieces.
We'd like to drill down now a little bit on responsibility and authority. This question will go first to Antonio Villaraigosa. Right now, cities control a lot of things, permitting timelines, fees, implementation. We'd like to hear how big of a role you believe the state should play in these matters. Should cities which consistently fail to meet housing targets face financial or legal consequences? What would you do if elected to enforce housing law for cities or counties which openly flaunt mandates?
Yeah, well, thank you for that question. Look, I've been a mayor and I've been Speaker of the Assembly. And there were too many things that Sacramento does that used to, as a mayor, we would push back on. I don't believe that one size fits all. But if we have a goal and we all say we want to get there, you have to be accountable. And so I said earlier, I intend to use a carrot and a stick. I want to collaborate with cities. But those cities, particularly the affluent ones and the affluent neighborhoods within those cities that think they're not going to bear some of the responsibility for building the housing we need, we will hold them accountable. First, on a short timeline, by the way. First, try to work with them, of course. I've always believed that you get more with honey than you do with vinegar. But second, we will pull their chain. At the end of the day, this housing is critical. We know that, for instance, with homeless housing, everybody likes to complain about the fact there's too many homeless. And then when we try to put a facility close to them, they say, no, not in my backyard. They want it all in the poor neighborhoods.
Mr. Villaraigosa, since we just have tech, I've heard stick and I've heard pull the chain. Legal action, yes or no? Would that be something you would take?
Yes, pull the chain is legal action and more. Absolutely.
All right. Mr. Hilton.
So, Alex, I think this may be the first area where there's a bit of disagreement between us. First of all, in principle, I really, truly believe in decentralization of power. I've always believed that decisions are best made closest to the people who affect them, and throughout my career and what I've argued for and written and the policies I've advocated, decentralization has been a real big part of it. I think the central problem here, actually, that's causing all this tension and obstructionism is this idea, this ideology really of density. That the only acceptable development, the only acceptable housing is infill housing in the current development boundary. I think that is what's driving a lot of this. And that's why we're seeing Sacramento trying to force housing into neighborhoods and towns and cities that don't want it. And you're seeing pushback and legal action, NIMBY, battles and all the rest of it. Instead, I want us to think about a very important fact. We already have the highest density in the country. Only 6% of our land is developed in California. You could increase that to 7% and have room for 10 million people in single-family homes on quarter-acre lots. We don't even need that much. And so my argument is, let's stop trying to force housing into places that don't want it and instead allow housing to be built in the places that do want it or where there's no one at all, and let's build new towns and cities for the future.
Once again, though, even if it's not a density law, if it's a target that's not met, would you take it?
I wouldn't even have any I would just scrap the whole system of targets and enforcement and instead open up another whole area of our state for development so we can build the housing we need. That's what we did before when we were growing as a state.
We will leave it at that, but I appreciate it. Matt Mahan.
So Governor Newsom's administration has been much more aggressive about intervening and holding cities accountable, including through lawsuits. And I think he and his team have been right to do that. And I will continue that approach. But I want to just note, Alex, that litigation is not a great answer for anyone. It takes a very long time. It's very expensive. And ultimately, what the courts often end up doing years later is instructing the locality to go back and update the plan. And then they're given another year to do that. So if we really want housing, we've got to go back to the last question and tackle the cost stack so that more projects get funded faster and get under construction. I also think we have some tools that the state can leverage that isn't just a litigation pathway. We saw when cities refused to submit compliant housing elements that showed that they had the zoning and the capacity and the programs and policies in place to allow housing, the state came in and said, we're going to allow by right development, meaning if a developer comes in and has the ability to finance and build a project on a given parcel, they'll have the ability to do that. You lose local control, but not in a way that's tied up in the courts for years. You actually get housing built as a consequence if you refuse to create the conditions for it to get built. So that to me is the happy medium. You allow local control as long as cities and counties do the right thing. And if they don't, you allow an override mechanism so that the housing gets built and you're not mired in the courts for years on end.
Thank you. Mr. Steyer.
So I think that there is something going on here that people are not willing to acknowledge, and that is Prop 13. The truth is, we built a lot of housing in California until Prop 13. And the reason the cities and counties don't want to build housing, yeah, there's NIMBYism for sure, and that's something we can address. But the real reason that overall in California people don't want to build housing is when housing is permitted and built in the city and county, they're responsible for the education and the health costs. And nobody else on this stage is talking about the fact that they're fighting back because they feel like they don't have the money. And the state isn't giving them the money. So when houses are built, they're fighting back and putting in big fees as a way of trying to combat the fact that Prop 13 took away the local money. That's one of the reasons that I'm pushing to close the corporate part of Prop 13, split roll $22 billion. I think the other thing that's really true here is this. The state has a mechanism to push back, and that's called withholding funds. You don't have to sue. It's like if some rich county doesn't want to do their share of house building, it's like, check, guess what? No money. And so therefore what you're trying to say to them is, it's a good deal to build housing. It isn't a good deal for them now, which is why they're not being irresponsible. They're trying to do their job and not get put in an impossible situation. That's why split roll is important, and using the money that the state controls to control them. I would like a state override. I think that's a good idea, but mostly it's going to be about the money.
All right, this question will begin with Steve Hilton. Even when zoning allows housing, developers of projects often face years of permitting, environmental review, and litigation risks. What specific reforms would you support to shorten project timelines? We've already heard. Get rid of CEQA, reform CEQA, if that is part of your answer. We also strongly would like to hear what specifically you would commit to ensure that environmental and community protections that are critical will also be preserved.
So a very specific aspect that I just want to address is something that I worked on actually, my first step into the world of California policy and politics was this issue of housing. A few years ago now, and in fact I tried to get a ballot initiative qualified for the ballot that would address two of the critical things that have been mentioned. In fact, Matt and I first met when I was talking about that a few years ago, and the two components, one I'll just briefly mention, which is capping impact fees, which Matt spoke about, but on CEQA and on the litigation risk, it was removing the private right of action, so that lawsuits using CEQA couldn't be filed by anybody at all to block housing. Just like with most of our laws, they could only be filed by the county DA or the state attorney general if it's a project affecting more than one county. That single reform would make so much difference and free not just those who want to build from the litigation, but remove the leverage that the unions use to actually hold things up and drive up costs. So ending the private right of action under CEQA would be a major reform that would really transform this whole area.
Thank you. Matt Mayer.
So I agree with that, and I think we've hit on a lot of the core things here. So, it is reducing litigation risk. It's moving to ministerial approvals, which can allow you to actually bypass CEQA entirely in infill projects. So and that's what we're doing in San Jose. In our downtown and our growth areas, there's effectively is no CEQA. You get to build by right. Localities should be required to approve permits in a timely fashion. I've proposed for conforming projects 30 days, or it's automatically by right development. We've hit on a lot of the core things, but I just say that I lead a big city that has, over my 6 years on this city council, has never once mentioned Prop 13 as a barrier to approving housing. We've approved 22,000 housing units, and never once has that been a barrier for us. The barrier has been we keep entitling and approving projects that never get financing. That is by far, we have tens of thousands of units. So what we found in our studies is if we can hit a density, an average density citywide of 30, 40 units to the acre, so you're mixed, some are less, some are more, we cover the cost of providing services. We even have declining student enrollment. This is not, I think we're pointing to the wrong problem. And if you increase revenue by another $22 billion, I promise you that's going to find its way into higher costs for small businesses and consumers in an already very expensive state.
Mr. Steyer.
So in defense of doing split roll, you should know San Jose is the most expensive city in the world. So it is a unique place with unique positives, but a very different set of circumstances than any place else in the world, including in California. Let me say this. Think about what happened after the big fires in Pacific Palisades and Altadena. And think about then the ability to get permits and coordination from all the different agencies, the state, the city, the county. And that is a huge issue of what is going on in terms of what everybody here is talking about, the state permitting rules. And I did work to get them reformed last year. But let me say this, this is an awful lot about coordination. Yeah. It is an awful lot about duplicative and different requirements that are not in any way, shape, or form working together. I talked to a big national developer this morning to think about housing. And he said, look, we crush it in New Jersey, blue state. we crush it in Massachusetts. Blue state, we can't get anything done in California. And I said, why? And he said, the difference there is they have an override for the governor. That in fact, all that duplicative stuff gets pushed aside and the governor has more power. And that is something that would make a huge difference because it's about the duplication and lack of coordination that actually drives people crazy.
Maybe because we were both mayors, I agree a lot with what Matt said. I do. And I know this. Prop 13 is broken. I didn't vote for it in the first place. But I can tell you this. The only way to fix it is to fix the whole broken tax system. That's the only, we have the highest upper income tax. We over-rely on that. Anybody who's had to balance a budget, and I did twice, with a Republican and a Democrat, with a surplus. I left this town on a sound financial footing. It's not just Prop 13, it's the whole broken tax system. Secondly, you asked me at the end about litigation. I said yes, but again, I'm with Matt. There are a whole lot of things we need to do before that. That's why I said pull the chain, and the like. But let me tell you, the biggest issue is the issue that I told you. We keep on setting all these goals, and then nobody's in charge of getting them done. That's what I did as mayor. And mayor, by the way, of a city bigger than San Jose, Oakland, San Francisco, and San Diego combined. A world-class city, an economy bigger than many states. At the end, big poverty in this city, poverty like Fresno, and also the biggest economy. So at the end of the day, you need a chief executive driving this, pushing this, putting it on dashboards like I did with you, David, where I said, I want this done. I want it done by this time. I want people responsible for doing it. That's how you get this done.
Matt Mahan, this question will go first to you. We're going to look specifically at the intersection between housing and labor. California cannot solve our housing shortage without the workforce. Contractors across the state report persistent shortages of skilled trades. And some have also expressed concern that new proposals to increase affordable housing through things like prefab units could put local builders out of work. What role should the state play in expanding the construction workforce, and how do we do that while simultaneously maintaining strong labor standards and delivering projects at scale?
It's a great question, and I don't think that these things are zero-sum. The answer, as is so often the case and so often how California leads the world, is innovation. I was just down in Carson next to Long Beach at Full Stack Modular and went through the entire production, the assembly line, if you will, where I was able to see firsthand factory-built housing. I've also been to Factory OS up in Northern California. This new methodology allows us to have the best of both worlds. So Full Stack is run by the building trades, fully unionized with skilled and trained, so there are apprenticeships for new employees to learn the trades. But because it's on an assembly line, it's faster, it's not exposed to the elements. They don't have to arbitrarily start and stop at certain times because of the traffic or noise impacts. They have units that come in steel frame, just a frame, and in 10 days are on the other side of the assembly line, fully finished inside, beautiful customizable exteriors. Because they're steel frame, they can go 28 stories high. They showed me a project at Cal Poly student housing, 320 units, that they are delivering in half the time and at 20% lower cost, and it's the first project in this factory. You imagine the state leveraging its tax credits, its funding mechanisms to incentivize that kind of housing at scale, tens of thousands of units. We can have both.
Thank you. Tom Stack.
So I completely agree with what Matt said. I've been saying for a long time, the way we do this is a lot of our problems are solvable if we will be the technology state that decides to use technology. And this is a good example. But let's talk for a second about jobs, because the big question in jobs for people in the state of California right now is AI. This is really a question of how are we going to protect millions of jobs? What is going to happen to those people? How is AI going to hurt those people? What is the government going to do about it? So let's talk about that for a second, because it does relate to people working in terms of building housing. Look, AI is here. It's not coming. It's here. It's going to be critical for the government to protect jobs, to make sure that we protect jobs in every case, but also to retrain people for skilled labor for a specific job. And what Alex was saying is there aren't enough people to do these jobs. So the first thing is we need to do that, a huge program, because everybody's worried about losing their jobs to the tune of millions and millions of Californians. The only way we're going to do that, which I've proposed, is for the people of California to own part of AI. For us to, in effect, as a state, take a small fee for every calculation made by one of those AI companies and use it, first of all, to protect workers and retrain workers for just this kind of thing that you can't do with a computer. And second of all, if it's as big as people say, we'll have a sovereign wealth fund to pay for all the things the state needs and give us a financial cushion. We need to do a huge job training effort, and this is the way to do it.
Let me agree with my two colleagues about the fact that it's not either or. It's all of the above. That's just anybody who's ever been a mayor or a chief executive knows, the problem with Sacramento right now is we make every decision like this. We've got to broaden our vision, everybody. It's not either or. First of all, we don't have enough workers to build the infrastructure. According to the American Society of Engineers and Architects, we have a D in infrastructure. And we're not building the 2 million plus housing that we need. So I've said that we have to focus on career technical education. The jobs that aren't going away with AI are those jobs. And so we got to double down and train the people for the jobs of the 21st century. And that is building housing, building infrastructure, building the grid, building everything we need. And that means we have to double down on that. But I'm with you, both of you, because you said you agreed. We got to do all of the above. We got to do all of the above. It's not just one thing, and it's not either or. And anybody that tells you that has never had the job of doing this like I have.
Mr. Hilton.
Well, how about this? I'm going to agree with my three colleagues here.
No, Steve, don't.
I know, I'm going to
do it,
get in
please.
terrible trouble because these are very common sense, practical things, and I think it's great that we have some consensus on that. I'll just focus on one aspect of it, which is really picking up where Antonio left off, which is the skilled and trained part of this in terms of the future workforce, both in terms of preparing ourselves for a world of AI, which is unpredictable. The basis of that is to have our kids leave school properly educated and trained. And there's two things that are going wrong. First of all, on the basic academics, we're falling way short. In terms of English, for example, it's less than half of students in our public schools meet basic standards. For math, it's 35%. That's a disaster. There's a whole set of reforms we need to do there on the basics. But actually, we need to learn from other places where you have a much earlier diversity in the school system. For example, Germany, where at age 14, you can have a totally different track of school, vocational school that's just as high status, but gives you a complete training from a much earlier age than just leaving school and maybe doing community college and then getting skills training. You can start that much earlier. So I think structural changes within our school system to bring much more diversity, both to improve academics, but also to introduce high quality, high status skills training much, much earlier than we do now.
Well, clearly we've all been getting along way too smoothly. So now let's turn to an area
Not letting us challenge one
where
another.
I think we might see some differences in this next question. This fall, voters will weigh in on a measure sponsored by the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. If approved, it will be harder to raise local taxes, and there would be a cap placed on municipal transfer taxes. These fees would eliminate billions in revenues for some California cities. Meanwhile, there's another ballot initiative that would impose a one-time 5% tax on Californians with assets worth more than $1 billion. Beginning with Tom Steyer. What drives your approach to who should be taxed, for what, and by how much? And yes, I might have thought a little bit about the order of this question. Let's be fully transparent.
So you guys should know that I'm the billionaire who thinks billionaires should pay more money. But let's take a look at what I've actually done, because I've passed 3 propositions. One of them supporting a tax, and 2, imposing taxes. And then let's talk about what I think I'd do. So the first one was no on 23, which was basically saying we need cap and trade. 2 oil companies came into California in 2010, tried to get rid of cap and trade. Everybody said the oil companies always win. And by the way, right now the oil companies are winning like crazy. And George Shultz and I ran a campaign that said no, and we got 70% of the vote. Secondly, $2 a pack cigarette tax. Legislature couldn't do it for 20 years. We got 60% of the vote. And the last was a tax on out-of-state corporations who weren't paying fair taxes in California. We took the money and used it to fix up schools from an energy standpoint so they could earn money going forward, save money going forward. I'm proposing closing split roll. Every one of those taxes is money we need. That's billions of dollars to Californians where Californians aren't paying a penny. And in every one of these cases, you can't come to me and say that the state is worse off. There's no second order effect. Am I for Howard Jarvis? No, Howard Jarvis are the people who put through Prop 13, and we're paying the price for it right now. That's why we're twisting ourselves up into all these pretzels. The billionaires tax. I am for taxing billionaires more. We have the richest state in the world, and we have the highest poverty rate. But the truth is, I think the tax isn't designed the way I would do it. It's a one-time tax, and second of all, it doesn't distribute the money the way everything else in California gets distributed.
I understand why people would want to tax people that make that kind of money, for sure. But what I say is this. They're already leaving. They've been leaving for some time. They're going to be gone pretty soon. And the federal government should do something, for sure. That's one. People that make that kind of money should pay more than the rest of us. 2, the problem with and I oppose the billionaire tax for that reason. But the other reason, it's a one-time tax, everybody. And it's not for everything. It's just for health care, which will be decimated by the big ugly bill. No question about it. But at the end of the day, we need to understand this. Jerry Brown left us with a surplus. And off and on over the last 6 years, we've been in deficits, sometimes surpluses, in part because we over-rely on the upper income tax, and in part because, different than all of you in your homes and your businesses, we spend more than we got by a lot. The LAO says we're looking at an $18 to $30 billion deficit next year, multiple years. Finally, on the Jarvis Initiative, absolutely not. It's going to devastate cities and counties. It's going to devastate their ability to tax fairly and smart, and so I'm against it.
Thank you, Mr. Houghton.
So we got to get this argument about tax rate. We already have the highest tax rates in the country. The budget of the state of California has nearly doubled in the last 10 years, as Matt often points out. In the last 5 years, what is it, 75% increase. The problem in California is not a shortage of money. We are swimming in money. State government, local government, taxes have risen and risen to the point where we have the highest poverty rate. 1/3 or more of Californians can't afford to meet their basic needs. People on the working poor are paying tax rates that are just unsustainable. That's why the first line of my tax plan is your first $100,000 tax-free. Specifically on local taxes, we can't keep gouging taxpayers to pay for things where the money is already there. And these loopholes that have been carved out to allow local organizations, often non-profits who then benefit from the sales tax increase or the local tax increase that they put on the ballot, this is all corrupt and it needs to go. And I'll be very direct. I'm very much in favor of the Howard Jarvis measure, and I should be clear that I'm endorsed by the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association as the endorsed candidate for governor, but I think that's something a badge I wear with pride because we are massively overtaxed in California. We don't need to tax more, we need to spend more wisely.
See, I told you, differences. Matt Mahan.
Well, let's go different again. So as usual, I fall somewhere in between some of my colleagues here. You asked about 3 taxes. On the Howard Jarvis proposal, I oppose it because it will put cities, counties, school districts at great risk, particularly when it comes to renewing revenue that they've come to rely upon. It's a bad idea. On transfer taxes, there is a distortion there, and we're seeing that in housing markets. So I don't think they should be eliminated, but I think a cap that keeps them at a low level, and I think that's ultimately where the compromise in the legislature will end up, is a reasonable cap on them so that they don't have a negative impact on housing supply and transfers. On the wealth tax, we've seen 14 European countries try this. They've almost all repealed it because the administrative costs are a nightmare. You need an army of assessors to go out picking through people's lives. You got to go to the Cayman Islands and figure out what people own, and you end up seeing less tax revenue. Ultimately, we've already seen $1 trillion of capital flight. There are other smarter ways to tax billionaires and other wealthy people. They shouldn't be able to endlessly borrow against appreciated assets as a way to avoid capital gains taxes. And there are other loopholes like that. That's what I would focus on. But ultimately, the truth is, we have the second highest overall tax burden in the country. After Prop 13, we added a ton of other taxes and fees. Spending in the capital is up 75% in 6 years. It shouldn't be more or less. It should be better. Let's focus on getting impact for our revenue.
Thank you. Tens of billions of dollars have been spent in recent years trying to tackle the problem of homelessness, and yet it is still a crisis throughout this state. The new LABC survey shows that there is not consistent agreement on how funding should be spent. Starting with Antonio Villaraigosa, if elected, wait for the question, please. How would you personally ensure that dollars intended to resolve homelessness are well spent and not wasted?
Well, first of all, I didn't realize if you're by transfer tax, you're talking about the ULA. No, I'm not for it. I didn't realize that slipped me. At the end of the day, UCLA and RAND have said, and I understand why they said mansions, but mansions cost more than $5 million in the city of LA. Just try down the street, one. And two, it impacts multifamily dwellings substantially and commercial development. According to RAND and UCLA, an 83% drop in investment. So I'm not for that tax unless they amend it. Second, with respect to your question, let me be clear. When I talked about a housing production accountability board, that's what that board will do with the governor on top of it, ensuring that we're doing what we're saying we're going to do. So we spent $24 billion from the state and billions more in the city, the county, all up and down the state, and homelessness went up during that period. The LAO legislative analysts did a study, and they said only 2 programs work.
But what will you do differently? Because we've just got a few seconds left.
Hold them accountable. That's what that housing production accountability board is all about. Making sure that we do what we say we're going to do, and when we're not doing it, pull that money back, do whatever we have to do to make it happen. That's what I'll do. And I said that at the beginning.
Mr. Houghton.
There are 3 things I'd do differently. First of all, we got to acknowledge that this is completely unacceptable, this scandal. You don't see it in other states and other countries. It shames us. And it's gone on for too long. We've got to be very strong and clear that it cannot go on like this. The 3 things I do differently. Number 1, when you see homeless encampments, people sleeping outside, I know that's not the whole extent of homelessness, but let's just focus on street sleeping. That's against the law. It's illegal. It's always been illegal. And the starting point is to enforce the law, to make sure that that doesn't happen. But then, of course, the most important part after that is how do you help people who you've got off the street? You need to get them into the services that they need to get their lives back on track. Over 80% of people who are outside are suffering from either severe mental health problems or drug or alcohol addiction or some combination. And it doesn't matter whether they developed those things as a result of being homeless, or whether they became homeless as a result of having them in the first place. We got to help them. And so the main difference on drug and alcohol addiction is that we've got to get over this ideology of housing first, where you give people shelter and housing without any conditions attached in terms of getting clean and sober. With mental health, we have to massively expand provision, which is woefully inadequate. And the main change there is to actually get the waiver from this 16-bed rule that Medicaid imposes for reimbursement for mental health care. And that way we can have modern, efficient mental health facilities that makes our money go further.
Matt Mahan, how will you make sure money is well spent when it comes to homelessness?
I know exactly what we need to do because we're doing it in San Jose, and we have led the state in reducing unsheltered homelessness by nearly 1/3. By the next count, likely more than that. And it comes down to setting outcome goals around a few core things. Number one, prevention. We created the nation's leading prevention system, short-term rental subsidy paired with intensive case management to help bridge people to something better. Number two, interim housing, and for those for whom interim housing can't be the first stop, inpatient treatment facilities, having the safe, dignified alternatives to the streets with supportive services. Number three, require people come indoors. The good news is 70 to 80% of the folks out there will gladly come indoors if you offer them something safe and dignified. But for those who are truly service resistant due to deep behavioral health challenges, we have to use our mental health courts, our conservatorship laws, our drug courts to compel people to come indoors, detox, stabilize, and have the opportunity to take advantage of services. And number four, be a pro-housing state. All the things we've been talking about. Bring down the cost structure, expand where you can build, make it easier and less expensive to build housing supply. And in San Jose, since I've been mayor, we've been building housing, including affordable and market rate, faster than job growth, which is helping us to reduce the inflow into homelessness. If we do those four things, we can really start to turn this around in California.
Mr. Steyer.
So I hate to agree with people on this stage, because we're all supposed to be bickering. But the truth is we've had a chance to listen to each other now for several months and listen to some good ideas coming from our competitors and friends. And so to me, the biggest question here is we know that being on the street is an incredibly dangerous, vulnerable, stressful situation. Only 1 in 7 people who get on the street have a mental health problem, but being on the street causes immense mental health pressures and immense mental health problems. Our current system, as Antonio said, no accountability. $24 billion, 7 years to get people into permanent housing, $750,000 to $1 million a key. Doesn't make sense. Does not make sense. What does make sense? Keeping people from getting on the street in the first place. Being on the street is incredibly expensive for them, incredibly expensive for us. Getting them off the street as fast as possible into the kind of emergency interim housing that Matt was talking about. Building houses. Look, the truth is we need to get people off the street for their sake. We need to get people off the street for our sake, for the people who are in the community. We need to have safe, vibrant, walkable communities in the state of California so kids can walk around, so families can be safe, and so people can enjoy the hell out of their community. So there is a huge pressure on us to solve this problem in a compassionate way, but to solve it so that we can build back our inner cities and make them the places that the people of California can absolutely thrive in and have a great time.
Speaking of having a great time, our final question, 10 seconds or less apiece, starting with Steve Hilton. This is an event organized by the LA Business Council. Your 3 favorite LA businesses, go.
Oh my goodness. Well, you know, the first thing that comes to mind, because I've been thinking about it a lot, Cinerama, which is shut down, and it's a disaster. It's a symbol of how our wonderful entertainment industry has just been crushed. Oh, I've already used up 10 seconds, I'm sorry.
2 more. You got 2 more and you will be kind.
Oh, the Red Lion Tavern in Silver Lake, which is a fun place I used to hang out there quite a lot.
Good schnitzel.
I don't know, I can't think of a third. Can you come back to me?
Matt Mahan.
I'm going to give you my top 2. So I just came from lunch at Langer's, talk about our homelessness crisis. But man, Langer's is awesome. Great pastrami sandwich, best in the world. And is Father's Office still making great burgers? All right, Father's Office. There we go. I'll just go with 2 like Steve.
There you go.
So let me say that going to Universal Studios as a 13-year-old is one of the highlights of my entire life. And I went with my 2 brothers and my 2 parents, and I've never forgotten it. I would say going out on the boardwalk in Santa Monica to that amusement park with my 4 kids, with my wife on a night is one of the absolutely most fun things I've ever done. And I'd say, honestly, street tacos, baby.
Former mayor of LA. Hit us.
No, he can't do it. That can't happen.
Yeah. I love Brent's, but I love Langer's as well. Brent's is in Northridge. You know, I love the pantry, and it's coming back. Hope of the Mission is going to be opening it. And, you know, tacos.
Come on.
You know,
What's better?
El Tepeyac, man. I mean, that's my place. Best burritos in East LA.
Thank you. Gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule. Thank you. Before you go.
All right.
Thank you. This concludes our panel today. I once again want to thank our 4 candidates and their team and our audience for joining us. At today's summit, we have also heard from LA Mayor Karen Bass, Long Beach Mayor Rex Richardson, a very diverse group of business and community leaders. If you missed them, check them out at the LABC website. Thank you.
We'll do it. Okay. Please welcome LABC Chair David Nahai.